from Washington, this is VOA News. Ukraine's army chief fired. Iran nuclear talks continue. I'm Ray Kouguell reporting from Washington. Ukraine's embattled President Yanukovych fired his army chief Wednesday as thousands of opposition protesters manned barricades in central Kyiv. The firing of General Volodymyr Zamana follows hours of clashes in Kyiv between opposition protesters and riot police that left at least 26 people dead and hundreds of others wounded. President Viktor Yanukovych, the target of the protests, is offering no explanation for the dismissal. Hours after the violence subsided, the Interior Ministry announced a sweeping anti-terrorist operation, saying protesters elsewhere in the country had overrun government arms depots and seized weapons and munitions. European Union foreign ministers will hold an emergency meeting today in Brussels, where they're expected to agree on sanctions against those responsible for the violence in Ukraine. French and German leaders have announced their support for targeted sanctions. Lisa Bryant reports from Paris.
Speaking Wednesday at a joint press conference with her French counterpart, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said both countries agreed the European Union should slap sanctions against those behind Ukraine's worst violence to date. Ms. Merkel would not say whether Ukraine's leader, Viktor Yanukovych, should count among those targeted by possible EU sanctions. EU foreign ministers are to hold an emergency meeting on Ukraine in Brussels Thursday afternoon. José Manuel Barroso, who heads the EU's executive arm, is also calling for targeted sanctions. He says the European bloc is watching the unfolding violence with shock and dismay. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Paris.
President Obama condemned the violence, saying the United States holds the Ukrainian government primarily responsible for dealing with demonstrators in an appropriate way. President Obama and Canada's Prime Minister Stephen Harper are meeting with Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto in Toluca, Mexico, at the North American Leaders Summit. Agreement on a Pacific Rim Trade Pact is at the top of their agenda. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Paris for talks focusing on the Middle East peace process. He met with Jordanian Foreign Minister Nasser Judah and then held talks with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Wednesday's meetings are Secretary Kerry's latest efforts to advance Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, including trying to craft a framework for what an eventual peace agreement would look like. A Sunni militant group linked to al-Qaeda says it carried out a double suicide bombing in Lebanon's capital Beirut Wednesday that killed at least 3 people and wounded dozens of others. The Abdullah Azam brigades claimed responsibility, saying the attack targeted an Iranian cultural center in Beirut. Working-level talks on Iran's nuclear program and international sanctions continued in Vienna Wednesday. The efforts are focused on trying to build on a 6-month deal reached in November that calls for Iran to cut back its most sensitive nuclear activity in exchange for limited sanctions relief. VOA's Al Pessin has details.
A long meeting late Tuesday was followed by another one early Wednesday, but Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif and the European Union's foreign policy chief Catherine Ashton were not there. Her spokesman Michael Mann says Ashton is still committed to the Iran talks.
Good work is being done, and we continue to work very hard towards making solid progress.
The goal of the talks is to assure the international community that Iran's nuclear program is not aimed at building a nuclear weapon, as Iran says. Diplomats hope to emerge from this week's first round with a framework for the hard negotiations that lie ahead. Al Pessin, VOA News, Vienna.
The United Nations top human rights official says deadly sectarian violence in the Central African Republic appears to be getting worse. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Navi Pillay says most of the ongoing abuses are being committed by anti-Balaka militia, who she charges are deliberately targeting the Muslim population of the capital, Bangui. The Russian men's ice hockey team again came up empty-handed in its quest for an Olympic gold medal. At the Sochi Winter Games, Finland eliminated Russia with a 3-1 victory in the quarterfinals. Russian teams have not won a gold medal in hockey since 1992. In other action, Norway won gold in the women's cross-country relay. Finland took the gold in the men's team cross-country sprint. The U.S. captured the gold in the men's giant slalom. Overall, the U.S. leads the medal count with 23. Russia and the Netherlands are tied with 22 apiece. I'm Ray Kouguell, VOA News.